What's up, everybody? My name is Joey Espinosa with CannabisPermits.com. I wanted to make a video discussing what it takes to get a cannabis permit in California. A lot of the questions that we get are from people that want to get started, that want to get into the industry, want to get a cannabis business going. And of course, one of your first steps is to eventually get permitted and get a state license. So I wanted to make this video. It's for people that are brand new to the industry, people that don't know much about the regulations, to give you a little bit of an idea of what it would take in order to get your cannabis business up and running. If you're in the industry, if you're running a business, it's probably a lot of basic stuff you already know. So this video isn't really meant for you. But let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we want to talk about is getting that local permit. In California, it's a dual licensing structure. So that means that you have to get a permit from a local jurisdiction, whether that's a county or a city. Then you get your state license after that permit. And that's why it's a dual structure. You cannot get a state license until you have your local permit. In some cases, the state will work with your local jurisdiction. If you can get your local jurisdiction to give you some sort of local authorization letter or something that says they're working with you to get a permit, the state will more often than not be willing to get you a state license. But for the most part, we're far past having temporary licenses be a thing, and now it's going to all be basically by the rule book, meaning you need to get that permit and then go ahead and get your state license. So one of the first things you have to figure out is, where do you want to get your cannabis business? And really, where can you get your cannabis business? Because local regulation is a huge play when it comes to, a huge part, I should say, when it comes to getting a permit. A lot of cities and counties, most in fact, have actually banned cannabis from being regulated in their city or county, and they don't allow it in their city or county. So that's why there's very few places you can actually get a business up and running. So one of the first things is to do some research on where you live, as far as what the local regulation is related to the cannabis permitting structure or lack thereof. So step one, figure out what your local regulations are. If you have regulations that allow for cannabis, then you got to figure out what the zoning restrictions are. And if you need help looking any of this up, feel free to reach out to us. We can help you with these things. But next thing is zoning. If you do, in fact, have a place that's going to allow you to have a cannabis business, you have to figure out what zones are allowed. Typically, retail, you'll have zones that are like light commercial or heavy commercial. Manufacturing will usually be in industrial zones, light industrial, heavy industrial, things of that nature. So each different business type within the cannabis supply chain is going to have certain zones that will allow you to operate there. And along with that, when you're looking for properties, is zoning and also sensitive uses. State law makes you make sure that you have to be at least 600 feet away from a school, a youth center, daycare. You can't be anywhere near those things, and it's basically measured as the crow flies, meaning that it's just from property line to property line. It doesn't matter if there's a freeway in between you and maybe a school. It doesn't matter if it takes a weird route to get to the school from where you are. They're just going to look at it from an aerial view. How far are you from those places? And that's going to be what matters the most. So once you realize your local regulations allow for it, you have to figure out what the zoning is, and then you have to make sure that that property you might be looking at is away from any sensitive uses. Really, the biggest thing is getting property locked in. A lot of people come to us and want us to help them and want us to get things going permit-wise, but they don't even have a property yet. So until you have a property in mind, or you have a property locked up, whether that's an exclusive letter of intent, whether that's actually a lease, some sort of way to guarantee or to lock you into a property is what you need before you can really do anything. So property is number one. You need to find a property that's going to be compliant with the local regulations and, of course, the state laws on top of that. So as I said, zoning is going to dictate what kind of business you can have in certain areas. So again, figure out, what kind of business do you want? Do you want a distribution business? Do you want a retail business? Do you want a manufacturing business? Are you trying to open a testing lab? Are you trying to just be a transport only company? Do you want to be a non-storefront delivery, meaning you don't open to the public, but you do deliveries for people? Do you want to be a combination of those things? You got to figure out what that is, and that will all be dictated by zoning again. So figure out what zones are allowed. How many permits do they allow is another question to ask. If your local jurisdiction is allowing you to actually have a cannabis business, they often regulate it by how many permits they want to issue. Usually it's retail that's limited the most. So maybe a city will say, we'll give 3 dispensary permits or 5 dispensary permits. And sometimes they'll allow distribution, manufacturing, cultivation, and testing to be unlimited. basically limited by the zoning, which is limited by how much how much real estate is available. So figure out how many are available. You may find that your city did regulate it and does allow it, but maybe they've issued as many permits as they want to issue, and now you have to go look for another city or another county. Figure out what the fees are going to be. You know, a lot of this stuff is not cheap. The fees can be pretty expensive. I just had a application for a dispensary that I did this past Thursday, and the initial fee was $8,000 just to turn it in. If we get farther down the line, we're going to owe an additional $7,000. So we're looking at $15,000 in fees just right off the top. And that's not even including state fees, which is another topic. You know, state fees, once you get your local permit, you're going to have fees for your application to the state, and you're going to have fees for the actual license to the state. So if you're looking to get into this thing, you got to have a good amount of money. It's not going to be cheap by any means. Finally, you got to look at the taxes. If they do allow local regulation and you figured out a property and you figured out the zoning and all these things we've talked about, you have to make sure that you want to operate a business in this city or county based on what the tax rate's going to be. Some cities have better taxes than others, and some cities have terrible taxes. Most of them have pretty terrible taxes, to be honest with you, but there are a few that are somewhat decent, and you need to be aware of this, because if you're going to run a business there, obviously your goal is to become profitable. That's why you're getting into business, and it can be pretty hard to be profitable if you're dealing with some ridiculous fees. In Oakland, for example, they are really open to allowing non-storefront deliveries. That's why there's a ton of delivery services that operate out of there, but they have a 10% fee, or excuse me, a 10% tax. So every time you're making a sale, you got to give Oakland 10% of that sale. It makes it pretty hard to make money. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how you want to get your business up and running, where you want to get it up and running. All of these things have to come into play before you can even start operating your business. Finally, like I said, the state license will be what comes into play after you get that local permit. And you got to consider, how long are you going to wait? So if you finally get that property and you lock it up, if you're not lucky enough to lock it up essentially for free and have a cool landlord, you're probably going to have to sign a lease with them, and you're going to be having to pay pay for that lease at least every month. And so you might be paying a lease to hold that property down for 3, 4, 6, even up to a year, months, 12 months. So you got to keep in mind, how long am I going to have to wait before I can even operate? It could take you 3 to 6 months just to get the local permit, and then it could take you another 3 to 6 months just to get that state license. And that's the reality of where this cannabis industry is, and how fast you're able to get a state license or a local permit. And in some cases, it's even longer. You know, I know people that have waited up to a year just to get a local permit and finish that process before they can even start that state licensing process. So those are things that you should really consider. I know it's a quick video and I ran through a lot of those things pretty quickly, but those are kind of the main topics and the main sticking points that I see a lot of people forgetting about or misunderstanding when it comes to wanting to get into the industry. If you say, I want to get into this and I want to do this and I want to do that, you have to figure out all of those topics I just talked about. Of course, we can help you with that at cannabispermits.com. You can send me a message on Instagram. You can email me, joey@cannabispermits.com, and we can talk about helping you with these things. These are part of the services we offer. But if you want to do it yourself, you got to figure out all of those topics to know whether or not you can get licensed and where you can get licensed. I hope this video was pretty helpful for you, and I hope it gets you on the right track. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.